Welcome to Brand Formula, a new podcast focused on the marketing and brands at play in Formula One today. I'm your host, Mordecai, and my co-host is Elyssa Margulis. Say hi, Elyssa.
Hello.
Hello. Between us, we have 30 years of marketing experience across agencies, in-house at brands, digital platforms, content studios, and more. We are also big F1 fans. Elyssa was raised on F1 from childhood, and I am a Drive to Survive COVID convert. Each week, we will bring to you our takes on the brands around F1, the teams, and the drivers themselves. We'll analyze the advertising and marketing moves being made, the audience as it continues to evolve across markets, and look at white spaces we think need to be covered. Who is seeing an ROI and who's DNF'd? So now let's talk the brand formulas shaping F1 today. Welcome to our third episode. Thank you for listening, and please support us by liking, subscribing, and following us on all of the things. Welcome to Brand Formula. We are back. It is episode 3. We've had no race this weekend. How was your weekend?
It was empty. It was sad. I'm not going to lie. I think I'm someone that loves some structure. So knowing when races are and planning my whole weekends around them gives me a sense of purpose all week. So I definitely felt like Thursday, I was like, wow, something's missing.
Mm-hmm. And it is. It is missing. It's like a little teaser, and now we have a week off. But we did have a lot of drops. Many were a bit like start of the season, announcing like, Puma had their drop and so on. But we also had a lot of shifts and changes around the paddock kind of happen. But I do want to just call out in terms of the drops, the Y3 Mercedes, which was incredibly fascinating, more for a Japanese machismo version of Kimi Antonelli, which was intriguing. And
I can't get
Toto,
over the photos. Wild.
I mean, I think it's just fascinating to see the embracing of main character energy that Toto is bringing to us by being in it with his drivers. This is really the Drive to Survive effect, which we'll be speaking of even more.
We
Um,
will, we will. And it's very interesting to see how they're prioritizing drivers in marketing and who is front and center. And obviously Kimmy is the future of Mercedes. So that imagery definitely was a little like, oh, okay. We knew who you want front and center.
But we are headed into a new weekend ahead of us with one of our favorite races, Japan. It's the start of cherry blossom season. I did see RB drop their cherry livery for the occasion. Looks very nice, although I have to tell you, I don't fully understand the fandom over liveries. It does not compute for my marketing mind, and I don't recognize what we're doing here, but yeah, I can't figure that out. But why do you love Suzuka so much?
I mean, florals for spring. It's just so pretty and so much creativity comes out of it. So I always feel like I'm inspired. It's the race that I really, really, really want to go to. And I love seeing what it brings.
Yeah, it really is a beautiful one, and the drivers love it too. They love the track, and it's just such a I feel like the first 2 races are sort of like breaking everyone in, and then we get into Suzuka, and then we have a month off this time. So,
Yeah.
there we are.
We'll still have
But
lots to talk about, though.
we will. And to demonstrate that, we have an episode, though we don't have a GP and we're not really kind of staying only topical. We've always wanted to really talk about the rise of female fandom in F1. It is something that we've been speaking about offline. I mean, I feel like I'm a direct product of the situation and the rise of female fans in F1. And it's one of our larger priorities. We both follow a healthy amount of content creators in this space, and there's such amazing, particularly young women that are just entering the space and putting their name on it. And so as we get into the topic of female fandom, not only are we self-confessed, but I thought it could be fun for us to kind of shout out some of our absolute favorites favorites. And just because you're not on our initial top three list for each of us does not mean you are not going to get mentioned on the pod. For me, it's Devyani, who has been a fan for probably as long as I have. She's in the Drive to Survive effect, but she has deep dived the F1.com like catalog and F1 TV. And so she just can reference, anything basically that Nico Rosberg did across his entire career. And I'm obsessed with that. Zoe and Hannah, who do the Fan Behavior podcast. And then thanks to my FYP, I recently encountered Len. And Len is from South Carolina and she's 24 years old. And she's been doing these deep dives about Black history in motorsport, where I learned about like a pit crew team that I didn't know about in NASCAR. And I will tag those three in the show notes in particular, and we'll tag Alyssa's as well. But they're really just, it's such an interesting take, and everyone has sort of this mix of historical and obsession of the now. Len also loves Oscar Piastri in that space. And you really get these layered conversations and just wonderful takes from all these content creators. Who are some of your faves?
I mean, for everyone listening, just so you know, Mordecai and I literally send videos and memes and F1 content back and forth to each other constantly, especially because we have a time difference. It's our pastime, and we wake up and
Mhm.
go to sleep with our FYP being F1 focused. So lots of people I'm sure that we'll keep talking about, but a few of my faves are Tony Cohen Brown, who is very technical and inside information, but just makes it so easy to understand, is so relatable. And she's really built up such an amazing following that she has unbelievable access now. So I feel like I'm getting information from her, not from other places. And then I know we both love Podium Sundays. She's anonymous, and so I feel like we're friends, even though I have no idea who is behind this account. But Podium Sundays takes are usually in line with my takes and our takes, and so
Mhm.
it feels kind of like you're just hot gossiping with a friend about F1. And then Marissa Kumari is one of my favorites. She really covers the fan experience, but she also does really quick F1 news hits. And she does it in a way that it's relatable, it's understandable, it's not too technical, but it also gives you the technical details. And I love that mix of content from her.
I mean, there's just so much fun. And, honestly, though, I think Tony is a little closer to our age, but the rest of them have so inspired us to do to just like throw this podcast together, to
Yeah.
just join them in the conversation. And so, thank you to them and so many more, and all the ones coming up. I see amazing work, especially from the people who really know how to socialize social and bringing those voices forward. It's just wonderful to see, and I think we'll just see more and more greatness come out of them. And Tony, I just have to say, it seems like she's just happier and happier as time goes on about like what's happening with the sport, because it's clear she's been doing this for a while around tech and F1. And it's really great to see her kind of hit her stride organically with the sport, because we do have a massive growth increase with F1. And when we approach this, there's just some things that this is going to be a bit of a lay of the land episode. This is a very nuanced topic. We're basically talking about half of the fandom. So this can't be one episode. Oh, we got it licked. We figured out the problems, the things we liked, and here's some white spaces. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. But in particular, as we looked at this, one of the viewpoints is we wanted to stay centered on data points that were about other male-led sports, because though it is completely legal to have a female driver on the grid, we do not have one. And different stats are varied. Some people, I think it's like 13% at maximum of a team is female right now. on that side. And, prejudice is alive and well in terms of what you think about F1 is true when you get to the grid. It is a male dominated on grid sport with 22 male drivers right now. But it does continue to evolve and change and so on. But this is about marketing to the female audience of that male led sport because it is a massive white space. You have a multi billion-dollar category. So, brands and marketers, it is time to get to work in particular. So, as we dive into this, for perspective for everyone, also America is becoming a bigger base, but one of the great comparisons that we can drive here is between the NFL and F1, so that we don't just stay in a sort of FYP F1 version of events. But there's a very clear through line for those that don't know about why this has happened, which is, and I'm the example of this one in particular, which is that Drive to Survive came out during COVID and otherwise. And as women started to watch it on Netflix, they became completely obsessed with this sport. It was a direct pipeline. So this great, branded content opportunity really just drew them in with the layers of strategy and so on. And last year at the start of the Australian Grand Prix, you had 45% female fans in attendance. And this is in line with the overall fan base now. As of late 2025, it's 40 to 42% global fan base is female right now. But there is a year-on-year increase of 43 million female fans right now going into F1. And just for perspective, from overall fandom, that is out of every 4 new fans into Formula One, 3 are female. And those are all those aspirational for us, young women in particular, who are 35 or and under, but primarily Gen Z, and they're loving what they are seeing. And for perspective, the reason we bring up the NFL is about, and this has varied a little bit through the years, but around 50% NFL fans identify as female, and what we're seeing there is that change. And they context this in the media and our marketing trades as this has happened because it's the Taylor Swift effect. Now, tell me, I mean, if you could see our faces, you may be able to see a clip of it. But the bottom line is this the Swift effect at all?
Ish, I would say. I don't think it's fully the Swift effects. Actually, I know it's not fully the Swift effect because over the past decade, female fans have increased year over year for the NFL. So by 2020, the NFL was reporting that 51% of American women were watching NFL games. How many NFL games? That, of course, they don't quantify. Maybe you could put me in there since I watch one game and you can guess which one it is. It's the one with the concert. But even the NFL's VP of Global Brand and Consumer Marketing said that Taylor Swift was an accelerant, but not the origin of the rise of female fans. And yes, there's a lot of parallels that we'll get into between fandom. But if you even look at the rising fandoms across other sports, celebrity helps. That celebrity can come from pop culture celebrity, it can come from a player, it can come from someone behind the scenes, but there has to be a reason to believe beyond just one singular person.
Absolutely. And, when we look at this as well, versus F1 versus NFL, the numbers also, just for perspective, we're talking about a fan base for F1 of 827 million fans across the globe. And the NFL has a global fan base of around 250 million. Now I did find some commentary that was like, no, it's 410 million, but like my bottom line is no source, no shout out, Facebook journalists. Like, we're not gonna go for you, but with that year on year growth and sort of this Drive to Survive convert era, unfortunately, the female fans just get treated in this way that, oh, isn't that cute? Let's focus on the romance in the paddock. That must be what they want to see. And, it has been nice to see a little bit of pullback around that. There was a lot of commentary online last year, like, why did I not see that overtake on the grid? Instead, I had to see the girlfriend of one of the drivers for just way too long. And I will also say there were complaints about too many mother shots as well. So it's not only the girlfriends, but just too much emphasis on sort of these periphery things instead of the sport. And they have pulled back on that. I think already we're seeing that on the grid in particular. But we are, one of the reasons that we bring up the Taylor Swift effect in comparison is that, and we are not a gossip podcast in any way, but you would be completely living under a rock if you didn't know that F1 is at risk of finding their own effect potentially this weekend in Japan.
Yeah, the Kardashian effect, which do your own research and what that actually means. And lots of online journalists will tell you many different perspectives, but huge name and huge opportunity to bring new people into this, whether it's through a relationship between Kim Kardashian and Lewis Hamilton or just her fans porting over. But to me, really, it's about parasocial relationships because the entry point to fandom has really shrunk. And social has given us this ability to feel like we are connecting to people. And there's so many more people now to connect with. We were just talking about it. Now you have the drivers, the teams, you have the WAGs, the moms, F1 Academy, creators. So, from a marketing perspective, there is the proximity effect, but there's also more access. There's more ways that brands can get into F1 without actually getting into F1. So I am interested to see what this means. And obviously, we are not a gossip podcast, but we are going to have to, on the side, gossip about what we see because we do have strong opinions about what this means and how it's going to impact the sport. Now, if wins, I'll have a very, very different perspective. Kim can be there every day if that happens.
It would be very, very hard for her to replace Nicole in my mind as the best F1 wag that has ever walked that grid. Go on your TikTok and do your own journey for that. But she was fantastic as a girlfriend. But back to our subject at hand, the reason that we're bringing this up, though, is that it's unfortunate to see that rise of female fandom get completely diluted into, oh, they're just doing it because they're a Swiftie. And, I happen to be the Swiftie in this conversation, and I don't watch any more NFL games than I did before, which is none, and I still watch none. But in that regard, would hate to see this wonderful explosion at the rate that it is that we're seeing in F1 get diluted to the Kardashian effect the same way that this has happened with the NFL. And so this is why we call it out. Like, regardless of gossip columns, that is the way people want to oversimplify the female audience, which is a huge disservice to the opportunity that is there for, again, half of your fandom, which, again, when we are speaking about F1, that's 827 million fans across the globe, 43 million new female fans every year. And you're going to tell me that suddenly they're just going to see what Kim Kardashian is wearing?
Not happening. And also, regardless of a split between the audience, we know as marketers that the majority of women in a household are making all of the decisions anyway. And so there is such a crossover between marketing to women and women's marketing. They are different. Every brand needs to center women within their marketing. It doesn't need to be this separate way to think about it because we all make decisions and we all need to be treated as decision makers, not just a gender, demographic, or psychographic.
Yeah. And there's, at the end of this, we are talking about marketing because we're talking about the commercial viability of these sports. And, it's important to note, the fact that though we're talking about the NFL having a much smaller, actual fan community, They make 23 billion in revenue just from last year over that, while F1 made 3.87 billion. But what we're finding is that when you bring F1 into a growing market, we had some news drop that you can see a real change.
Yeah. This blew me away. I know I instantly sent it to you, but the Miami Dolphins owner said he makes more money and gets more attendance from 3 days of the Miami F1 race in the stadium than the entire Dolphins season. Now, that's not even factoring in hospitality spends and tourism. And F1 is a global sport, yes, but that is really, really insane.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that really takes us to this kind of state of play episode that we are in, which is, there is a white space here. And there are some things that are in this space which we want to call out because some are do's and some are don'ts. And so, one of the things that we saw, because we just kind of came off of International Women's Day, and for International Women's Day, it was in Australia, and they made the Melbourne Turn 6. They named in honor of Laura Mueller, who's Esteban Ocon's race engineer at Haas, and Hannah Schmidt, who is the head of race strategy at Red Bull. And really often, I'm just going to side note that she is responsible probably for Max's almost clinching a fifth last year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, way to go, Hannah. But in that space, you also had on International Women's Day, Jamie Chadwick did a initiative to get 5,000 young women into free karting taster sessions if you were under 18. And none of these things are bad. They're wonderful. We don't mind seeing them. This isn't a negative, but the issue is when you get into the marketing leadership of that is that those are CSR initiatives, corporate social responsibility. And that is a line item that you will not get inflated the way you need to address this market. There's not going to be 12 or 14 new CSR initiatives because that one went so well. And the line item for that will also not convert into, oh, well, then we need to spend more money at go karting tracks now that we supported this great initiative and lots of people followed Jamie Chadwick and submitted. It's just a bit of a write off. And that is incredibly unfortunate to this community because that seems to be what they're doing to these women that are going because that's really all you see. So you see a lot of what brands are doing. It's nail art and experiential. I will say that a WPP agency, VML, they released their Future 100, which is one of my favorite trends decks because I'm in the innovation side of things. So I'm a trend obsessive. And they called out New Wave Fandom and they headlined that this year by saying it's about F1. The F1 female fandom is a huge opportunity for brands. But what do they show as the graphic for that? The Glaze and Aston Martin gel nails. So the question here is, will Pink It and Shrink It sport marketing for women ever end?
I fear not. I think that there needs to be a bit of education and understanding on the brand level, on the marketing level. And F1 actually has to take some of that responsibility as well of really working with their sponsors, working with future partners, bringing them together to really deeply dive into what the fandom means, what the ecosystem of that is, where they can slot in, how to build something that is not just a one and done and is not surface level. That's not what women are asking for. So it's equal parts of that responsibility. And I think one of the main things that we've seen lately is this lack of perspective in how and what women want. My biggest, biggest fail, Sky Sports Halo, which was launched to be this Lil Sis feed of Sky Sports main channels dedicated to female fans. So it was a TikTok channel that launched and it was very hot girl walks, matcha lattes, sparkles, emojis. And if I could insert an emoji here, it would be the vomit one because it was everything wrong with Pink It and Shrink It. And it really showed them because it lasted a whole 48 hours before it was shut down. We do not
Mhm.
need a patronizing caricature of what it looks like. We need to address the actual barriers. what fans are actually asking for, how we get women into new spaces and places within the sport. So it's not a girly pop solution.
It isn't, but also, to get a new TikTok approved by Sky, that is a long journey. That does not happen overnight. That potentially is a hire, or at least it's adding into someone's responsibilities of a role. That was a lot of storyboarding to sell in the idea that they would need to do it, and a lot of strategic justification as to why it was even there. And, so much of this takes time, and it's just that was such a disappointment, but also going back to those lovely content creators that we were talking about, shut it down in 48 hours.
Yes, they did.
You
Yes,
gotta
they did.
love, this era for that.
I am so fascinated actually to think about what the presentation at Sky Sports looked like when they said how much they could sell advertising around Halo, because I am sure that they said, "Ooh, all these women are entering into this fandom, not just F1, but sports in general. We need to capitalize and make money on it because this is a group of people that are willing to spend." And that is how that decision was made, less from an audience and a need perspective and more from a revenue perspective. And that's okay. I love sitting on the revenue side, but you have to be doing it for the right reason. You have to know who you're doing it for, why you're doing it, and what the impact is going to be that you want out of that besides just the money.
Absolutely. It's also the fact that they feel the need to silo the female audience away, that the female audience could not understand F1 unless it was delivered with glitter and pink horses. Like, that we can't get
Yeah.
it. Again, not going to the human truth, the root. I am a strategist. Like, at the end of the day, I'm looking for my human truth. And the human truth is this is a drive to survive pipeline. If we are speaking en masse, a large branded content proposition which went into people's lives, went into the sport details, brought in drama and exposed, and people said, I want to know more. And so that came out of it, and now we have fans, and you are trying to treat them like they know nothing when they come forward. And if they know something, even those on the grid, what you're seeing is that we're at this sort of like tipping point, because there we have Laura and Hannah, who we spoke about having, that curb for them. But now it's the fact, like, every time that I watch a broadcast, I have to be reminded of Hannah's on the pit wall in this very tokenistic, just I'm so over it. It's the two of them are the primary suspects in this, and they are amazing on their own. Esteban Ocon is doing fantastic with her, and, increase to increase. And I'm going to acknowledge her feminine touch a little bit, because that is one of the most aggressive drivers that is normally out there. And he is getting more and more strategic, and these layers that are just known as a bit more feminine qualities. We would both be remiss, and we've shouted her out on our podcast before, but I don't like all the tokenism, but I will take another grid walk with Bernie Collins going up with a live mic to every woman she knows that works in F1 on the grid last year was just the best. I think someone called in sick or something, and so she ended up, like, it was just so random. And was it not the best grid walk of last year?
It was the best because it was like you were there with her and you were just walking with a friend and chatting, and it felt so natural. And a lot of times, and we know so much research goes into the commentators, and you not only have to deeply, deeply, deeply understand the sport, you have to also deeply be able to just be a normal person and have a real conversation. And sometimes I feel like they lose that. And Bernie never does. And it just made it so real. It was so fun. I would love some kind of contest where we can have a ride along with Bernie on a grid walk. I will submit my name a million times.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it was authentic. And although it is overused in every boardroom and at every marketing conference, the bottom line is you can't survive in marketing 2026 without authenticity. I'm going to just give a small shout out to my friend Visha, who has a book on marketing authenticity dropping right before Cannes Lions this year. So we'll give a little shout out closer too. Um, but as we sort of close out sort of what the state of play is, I do just kind of want to be, maybe it's a little bit redundant to the obvious, but there's also just the basic sexism in marketing that is just playing out in F1 and how people think that they need to communicate to women. So like there's the pink it and shrink it, but if we're going to give some tips and sort of culminate with what we've just said, like do not treat female fans as newbies. Do not start every conversation with, let me explain this from the very beginning and be super condescending that we haven't gone and deep into the sport. Don't make it all in on aesthetics, communicating to female fans only via visual cuteness. I will take a Leah Leclerc meme any day, but it's not the focus of, again, why I'm tuning in and giving 8 hours of my TV weekend to this sport on top of all of the TikToks we send between each other and all of that. And get us off the sidelines, get women off. It is not an accessory to the sport. Female fans are in the fabric. It's a double insult to keep them off the grid and not have them really participate beyond that. And that is your white space, brands. Your white space is move from your experiential and your social at the side and come to the grid and have a normal conversation that allows for a growth of a female brand into the space and see what happens when you actually show up and actually have a conversation with some real ROI from a real grid presence. Because if you keep doing these activations where it's like a tree is falling in the woods, does it make a sound? Like, does it matter? And your female fandom matters very much.
Matters so much, and it needs to live beyond the surface. Like you said, it needs to be part of true strategy and understanding. One-offs do not convert. There needs to be a broader content strategy, and especially knowing the fastest growing fandom in F1 is Gen Z women. They're looking for community. They're looking for people that share their belief system, that they want to talk about. They want to share things. The actual brand love and brand recognition is happening in the DMs. It's happening in the group chats. It's happening in the places that brands need to be invited in. And you only get invited in if you are worthy of being shared. You're worthy of being talked about. And that can start from an experiential perspective. That's an amazing place to build actual connection with people on the ground, but it needs to be part of something broader. You need to think about not just the ROI, but something that I like to call the ROC, the return on community. So how are you building that actual community? What actions are they taking? How are you measuring that as part of a much broader partnership that is not just about that one-off?
Yeah, F1 has figured out how to, in essence, although it's nice to be invited to a Grand Prix, um, but it is
That's
a
us
lot of
saying we're available. We're available.
100%, and that's wonderful, but it is a lot of taking. So you come to the Grand Prix, we don't know how to communicate to your community, so will you communicate to it? But what about communicating to those content creators? Giving them a new way to be looking at things, a new way to have a tote board. I always think of, I used to go to LA Dodgers games with my friend Viha, and Viha used to go with a clipboard and a piece of paper, and she knew how to do all the stats of everything that was going on. And we're speaking of different sports, but that's an example of female fandom and how they like to get into the analysis, the strategy. I've said on many conference main stages that F1 is a strategy as a sport and how exciting that is, and making sure that we're communicating to them, because that white space, it's, both of us are examples of the white space of not being communicated to. If you break it down in fandom, I'm considered a hardcore female fan because like I came in hard and quick and and you are more of a diehard fan because you're in it till from birth to death, you know, like on that journey, like it's not leaving you. It's on your vanity plate and everything is good in the world with it. But, you know, how are you communicating to us? We want to know all of the nitty gritty of it. And so this is a tee up into what is the future of female fandom in F1, but, you know, we don't all have to be karting next week. We can be in the weeds and getting educated.
Yes, there is so many different ways to come into fandom. And there has been traditionally more of a narrow definition of fandom, and F1 is really, I think, maybe one of the biggest ways that we've proven that there is a word cloud. And there are many different words that are going to go on that cloud to define what fandom is. And that is part of the reason that you're seeing this massive rise in creators. It's the reason that we are putting ourselves in that same space and creating conversations around it. While we're not coming to it specifically from a women's point of view, we're women in F1, and that's talking about marketing. That is a niche within that word cloud. And so I'd love to see that future expand a little bit. And I think a big part of that is finding advocates on the marketing side, on the brand side, and people that have passion around telling these stories and can elevate it beyond a line item in a marketing plan to really want to innovate and go deeper and push the industry, push F1, push themselves to think about it. So that's the future that I hope.
Yeah. And I mean, we are only on episode 3, but, you know, we know from the conversations that we've had, the mostly happening on LinkedIn in particular around it, but the comments that we've gotten on our posts and our content from this podcast have been very much like, you guys are at the front of this, as if we've invented this female fandom, which neither one of us would take credit for, and in
No.
any way, shape, or form. But it is that belief that, you know, we're on this precipice to do something new.
Yeah, that's goes back to the beginnings of our conversation around the NFL. There's not an increase in fans around these sports because we all want to be in them, actually. We are in them. We don't need to be traditionally playing them or have played them growing up, or that's not what fandom is. Fandom is about feeling like you're a part of a community. It's shared experiences, it's shared language, it's shared understanding of something that is not just about you. And so I know we've already said it, but it's fandom's not reductive. It's not one thing. There's not one way to do it. You won't find me karting, but I love playing in F1 sims. I've done it twice now. I've definitely gotten a bit better. The last time I was the best in the room, I was on the beginner level, so you're not going to find me y- winning anything soon, but it's fun to see also these new ways to experience beyond just that kind of traditional way to get into that actual sport.
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly also one of the things I love about F1 is, even if you enter the sport completely ignorant, which I was watching Drive to Survive when I had COVID all those years ago, and I was like, man on fire, you know, what is that? But we are now in a new era of cars. So everyone is learning. None of the teams know the cars completely. The FIA doesn't understand the new regulations they set out themselves. That's not even an insult. I just mean everyone is learning. So if there was ever a sport that you get to continue to be a newcomer and be on the same page of everyone, to me it is F1, because it allows you to be learning with everyone and watching people make mistakes and try new things, and you know as much as they do from the time before. So whether we see the Macarena wing from Ferrari in Japan or not, you know, we're all going to be in it together, men or women, watching this sport.
It's such a good point, and it allows individual fandom, which I love. We all get to bring our own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and that's probably also what helped to build where we're at now from a fan perspective, and then to move that into 2026 where everything is just brand new. You don't need to have all of the backstory. You don't need to go back and watch every race. You can if you want to, but everyone can enter. And from a brand marketing perspective, that's also so important. You can think about that Venn diagram between the diehard fan, the lifelong fan, and what sits in between. And there's something for everybody in
Yeah. Also, just follow Devyani. She will tell you what the
that.
history of F1 is in very quick, like 6-minute videos that are just so exciting. Like, she's a very exciting creator. But with that, I think we've given you plenty to do offline of our podcast and on socials and so on. That is our episode 3. We see you, female fans. We see you, female content creators. And we also see you, gentlemen, like, make space for us on that grid. We are coming. So with that, to just sign off to all of you, to just say, to remember that marketing isn't about whose voice is the loudest, but whose voice you will remember. And we look forward to continuing to talk about marketing and F1 with all of you, who's seeing an ROI and who has DNF'd. So please like, subscribe, and do all the following. We're building up our channels. We're still working out this whole thing. We've got an entire month of no Grand Prix content to come, way before we thought we would. So for now, goodbye and lights out.
Lights out.